I never imagined that my 65th birthday would be the night my life would split in two. I had spent 3 months planning that party. I wanted everything to be perfect. 200 guests, people I had worked with for decades, old friends, distant family members who traveled from different parts of Mexico to be there. I rented the best event hall in town, hired a live band that played the songs Christine used to say she loved, ordered food that I knew everyone would enjoy. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. When I woke up that morning, I felt that tightness in my chest that had become common over the past year. My cardiologist had told me it was stress, that I needed to take things easier. I took my medication with a glass of water and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, 65 years old, deep lines around my eyes. Grey hair that Christine said made me look distinguished, but I knew what she really thought. The party started at 7 in the evening. I wore the navy blue suit that Christine had chosen weeks before. She looked stunning in a red dress that hugged her body. 56 years old, and she took care of herself as if her life depended on it. I remember thinking she did it for me. How naive I was. The first 2 hours went well. People approached to congratulate me, to tell old stories, to laugh about things we had lived through together. I smiled, shook hands, hugged old friends, but my eyes always returned to the same table, the table where Christine sat with Marco, my business partner for 15 years. Marco and I had built the company together. We started with nothing, just an idea and the will to work. He handled the commercial part. I took care of operations. We were a good team, or so I thought. He was 48 years old, athletic, with that easy smile that made people trust him. I had trusted him with my business, with my life, with access to my home, my family, my wife. Throughout the night, I watched them. Christine laughed at everything Marco said. She touched his arm constantly. She leaned toward him when she spoke, as if there were no 200 people around them. He refilled her wine glass before it was empty. They looked at each other with a complicity that made my stomach turn. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, that the heart medication was making me paranoid, as Christine said whenever I questioned anything. But I could not ignore what I was seeing. Other guests were noticing too. I saw curious looks, whispers behind hands, that uncomfortable expression people make when they witness something they should not be seeing. Around 10 at night, I decided to approach their table. I needed to see up close, to confirm if what I was feeling was real or just my insecurity. I walked slowly, greeting people along the way, but my destination was clear. When I was about 3 steps from their table, close enough to hear but not close enough for them to notice my presence, Christine said something that made my blood freeze in my veins. Her voice was loud, loosened by the wine she had been drinking all night. She was not whispering. She did not care who might hear. She leaned toward Marco, her hand on his thigh, and said clearly in Spanish, "After this party I am filing for divorce. This old man does not satisfy me anymore." Marco threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud laugh, carefree, as if she had told the funniest joke in the world. Then he responded, his voice also loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Finally, Christine, I have been waiting for this moment for 3 years. 3 years. The number echoed in my head like a church bell. 3 years of lies. 3 years of betrayal. 3 years where I had been the fool who suspected nothing. My legs trembled. I felt the physical pain in my chest intensify, that pressure that my cardiologist had warned me about. For a moment, I thought I was going to have a heart attack right there, in the middle of my own birthday party, in front of everyone. It would have been easier. It would have been less humiliating than what I was feeling at that moment. I looked around. Several people at nearby tables had heard. I saw it in their eyes, that mixture of shock and pity that people have when they witness someone else's humiliation. Some looked away quickly, pretending they had heard nothing. Others stared openly, waiting to see what I would do. Christine still had not seen me. She was too busy stroking Marco's face, laughing, planning their future together. My future, our future. Everything I had built, everything I had worked for, everything I had believed was solid and real. I should have left, I should have walked out of there with whatever dignity I had left. But something inside me broke at that moment. It was not anger, not yet. It was something colder, more calculated. It was the absolute certainty that I would not let this end the way they had planned. I turned and walked toward the stage where the band had been playing. My legs were shaking, but my mind was strangely clear. The band leader looked at me with concern when he saw me approach. I signaled for him to stop the music. The sound died gradually, and with it, the conversations in the hall. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Christine finally looked up and saw me on the stage. I saw her face change, saw the moment she realized I had heard, but there was no remorse in her eyes, only annoyance at being discovered before she had planned to tell me. I grabbed the microphone. My hand was steady even though my heart was racing. The silence in the hall was absolute. Even the waiters had stopped moving. I looked directly at Christine, then at Marco. Then I let my gaze sweep across all the guests, all those people who had come to celebrate my 65th birthday, who had just witnessed my public humiliation. And I smiled. It was not a bitter smile. It was not a sad smile. It was the smile of someone who knows something no one else knows. The smile of someone who has been playing a different game all along. I opened the folder I had brought with me and placed it on the music stand in front of me. Inside were documents I had been preparing for 3 months, documents that would change everything. But before showing them, before revealing what I knew, I needed everyone to understand the complete story. I needed them to know that what they had just witnessed was only the tip of a much darker, much more painful iceberg. I brought the microphone to my lips and began to speak. I met Christine 28 years ago at a business conference in Guadalajara. I was 37 years old, recently divorced from my first wife, focused entirely on building my transportation company. I had 3 trucks and a dream of expanding throughout the country. I worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. I had no time for relationships, for romance, for anything that distracted me from my goal. Christine was 28 years old. She worked as a sales representative for a hotel chain. She was beautiful, confident, ambitious. She approached me during a coffee break, introduced herself, started talking about business opportunities. I liked that. I liked that she talked about work, about growth, about success. I thought I had found someone who understood me, who shared my vision. We dated for 6 months before getting married. Looking back now, I realize it was too fast. But at that time I was convinced I had found the perfect partner. Someone who would not demand time I did not have. Someone who would support my business ambitions. Someone who wanted the same things I wanted. The wedding was simple. We did not have money for big celebrations. My company was still growing. Every peso was reinvested in trucks, in routes, in expansion. Christine said she did not mind. She said she preferred to build a solid future than to waste money on one day of party. The first years were good, or at least I thought they were good. I worked constantly. I left the house at 5 in the morning and returned at 10 at night. Christine took care of the house, as we had agreed. On Sundays we had lunch together, we talked about the week, we made plans. It seemed enough, the company grew. After 5 years I had 20 trucks. After 10 years, 50. I hired Marco when the business became too big for me to handle alone. He was young, energetic, with fresh ideas about how to expand. Christine met him at a company dinner I organized to celebrate a particularly good year. I remember she told me that night on the way home that Marco seemed like a very capable person, that I had made a good decision in hiring him. I thought she was just being supportive. Now I know she was evaluating him in a completely different way. Around our 15th year of marriage, things started to change. Christine became more distant. She stopped asking about work. She spent more time out of the house with friends I never met. When I came home, she was already asleep. When I woke up, she was still sleeping. We lived in the same house, but we barely saw each other. I told myself it was normal, that all marriages go through difficult phases, that after 15 years together, it was natural for the passion to fade. I focused even more on work. The company continued to grow. Marco and I became 50-50 partners when I decided I needed someone I could fully trust to share the responsibility. Christine started complaining about my age. It started subtly, with comments that seemed like jokes. When I turned 55, she said I was becoming an old man. When I turned 60, she started calling me old openly. She said I should retire, that I should let Marco handle the company, that I should enjoy life instead of killing myself working. But I loved working. It was the only thing that gave me purpose, especially because at home there was only coldness. Christine barely touched me anymore. She said she was tired, that menopause was affecting her, that I should understand. And I understood, or I tried to understand. 5 years ago, things got worse. Christine started treating me with open contempt. She rolled her eyes when I spoke. She interrupted me constantly. She contradicted me in front of other people. She made comments about my appearance, my age, my energy. Nothing I did was right. Nothing I said was interesting. I became a nuisance in my own home. I started taking longer to return home after work. Sometimes I stayed in the office until midnight, reviewing documents that did not need reviewing, just to delay the moment of entering that house where I felt like a stranger. When I finally arrived, Christine was in her room. We slept in separate rooms for the last 3 years of our marriage. She said I snored, that she could not sleep with my breathing problems. I felt lonely in a way I had never felt before, more lonely than when I was divorced at 35, more lonely than when I was building the company with nothing, because this loneliness came from being with someone who was supposed to love me, but who looked at me as if I was garbage. I thought about divorce many times, but something always stopped me. Maybe it was fear of being alone at my age. Maybe it was the hope that things would improve. Maybe it was just cowardice. I did not have the courage to admit that I had spent 28 years of my life with someone who did not love me. A year ago, everything changed. I started having heart problems. Nothing serious, my doctor said. Stress, high blood pressure, normal things for a man of 64 who worked too much. But it scared me. For the first time in my life, I felt mortal. I felt old in a way that had nothing to do with the number of years. I told Christine about the diagnosis, expecting, I do not know what I was expecting. Comfort, maybe. Concern. Some sign that she still cared about me, even minimally. Instead, she looked at me with an expression I could not decipher at that moment. Now I know what it was. It was calculation. She became suddenly attentive. She asked about the medication. She wanted to know exactly what the doctor had said. She insisted on going with me to the appointments. She started talking about planning for the future, about what would happen if something happened to me, about protecting what we had built together. Together. As if she had built anything. As if she had worked 16 hours a day for 28 years. As if she had risked anything beyond marrying a man who worked like a mule. She brought papers for me to sign. She said they were powers of attorney, protections in case I became incapacitated. She said it was normal that all couples our age did it. She said it was to protect me, to protect us. And I signed. God help me, I signed everything she put in front of me. I felt so vulnerable at that moment. The heart diagnosis had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. I felt weak for the first time in my life, and Christine took advantage of that weakness with a cold precision that now takes my breath away. For 3 months, I lived in a fog of medication and fear. The doctor adjusted the doses, tried different combinations. Some made me dizzy, others made me confused. Christine watched everything with that false concern that I mistook for love, until 3 months ago, when everything changed forever. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was home early because I had a cardiology appointment the next day. Christine was out as usual. I was in the living room, watching television without really paying attention, when the landline rang. We barely used the landline anymore. Most calls came to cell phones, but it rang insistently and I answered without thinking. Before I could say anything, I heard a man's voice that I did not immediately recognize. He was talking to someone else. He had not realized someone had answered, and what I heard in the next 3 minutes destroyed whatever remained of my marriage and my trust in humanity. It was Christine's lawyer, and he was talking to Marco. I froze with the phone in my hand. My first instinct was to hang up immediately, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the tone of the lawyer's voice, professional and cold. Maybe it was hearing Marco's name in a conversation I was not supposed to hear. I covered the microphone with my hand and listened. The lawyer was reviewing some kind of strategy. He spoke quickly, using legal terms I did not fully understand at first. But then, the words started to form a clear picture, a horrifying picture that made my stomach turn. They were talking about me, about my mental capacity, about the medication I was taking for my heart. The lawyer said that the cardiac medications, especially at the doses I was taking, could cause confusion, memory problems, difficulty concentrating. He said this was documented, that there were medical studies supporting it. Marco responded that yes, he had noticed I was more forgetful lately, that I repeated questions, that sometimes I seemed lost during business meetings. I wanted to scream that it was a lie, that I was perfectly fine, that the only times I seemed confused were when Christine gave me the medication with juice that tasted strange, or when I felt especially tired after dinner at home. But I stayed quiet, listening, with my heart beating so hard I thought they could hear it through the phone. The lawyer continued. He said the next step was to document these episodes of confusion. That Christine needed to start taking me to a specific doctor, someone who would be sympathetic to their cause, that they needed medical reports stating I was not in condition to make important decisions, that with those reports and the powers of attorney I had already signed, they could request legal guardianship. Marco asked how long the process would take. The lawyer said it depended, but that if they did things right, they could have legal control of my assets within 6 months. 6 months. They were giving themselves 6 months to steal everything I had built in 40 years of work. Then Marco said something that made my blood freeze. He asked if there was any risk that I could recover, that the doctors could adjust the medication and I could get better. The lawyer laughed. He actually laughed. He said it did not matter because once they had guardianship, even if I recovered, it would be almost impossible for me to prove I was competent again. That the legal system was designed to protect vulnerable people, and that once someone was declared incompetent, the burden of proof reversed. Christine joined the conversation at that moment. I had not realized she was there too. Her voice came from further away, as if she was in another room but could hear the conversation. She said they needed to accelerate the process, that I had been suspicious lately, that I had asked uncomfortable questions about the papers I had signed. Marco told her to calm down, that everything was under control, that in a few more weeks they would have everything they needed. Then he said something that hit me like a physical blow. He said that after they had guardianship and divided the assets, Christine could divorce me, that it would be easier to leave an incapacitated old man than to deal with a messy divorce where I could fight. Divided the assets. He said divided, not transferred. They were going to share what they stole from me. My business partner and my wife, the two people I had trusted most in the world. Christine laughed. It was a light laugh, carefree, as if they were planning a vacation and not the destruction of my life. She said she could not wait, that she was tired of pretending, that she was tired of living with an old man who no longer served her for anything. The lawyer interrupted to remind them that they needed to be careful with communications, that they should not discuss these things on recorded lines. Marco said they were on his personal cell phone, that there was no risk. The lawyer insisted they be more discreet anyway. The conversation continued for a few more minutes, discussing technical details that I barely processed. My mind was spinning, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what I had just discovered. It was not just infidelity. It was not just betrayal. It was a calculated plan to destroy me, to steal everything I had, using my own health problems against me. When they finally hung up, I stayed seated with the phone in my hand for several minutes. I do not know how long. The television was still on, but I could not hear what it was saying. My mind was completely blank in shock. Then the rage came, a cold, calculated rage I had never felt before, not even when my first wife left me for another man, not even when I lost an important contract that almost bankrupted my company in the early years. This was different. This was personal in a way that went beyond anything I had experienced. I wanted to confront them immediately. I wanted to go to Marco's office and hit him until my hands hurt. I wanted to grab Christine by the shoulders and scream in her face that I knew everything, that she was a liar and a thief, and that she would not get away with it. But I did not do any of that. Something in me, the part that had built a successful company from nothing, the part that knew how to plan and wait for the right moment, took control. If I confronted them now, they would simply deny everything. They would say I had misunderstood. They would say the medication was making me paranoid. They would use my own anger against me as proof that I was not mentally stable. They would accelerate their plan before I could defend myself. No, I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to play their own game, but play it better. I spent that whole night awake, sitting in my home office thinking. Christine came home around 11. She knocked on the door to tell me she was back, asked if I needed anything. Her voice was sweet, concerned. I told her I was fine, just reviewing some work documents. She said not to stay up too late, that I needed to rest for my appointment the next day. I wanted to vomit, hearing that false concern in her voice. The next day I went to my cardiology appointment as planned, but after seeing my regular doctor, I asked to speak with him privately. I told him I needed his honest opinion about something important. I asked him if the medication I was taking could really cause the confusion and memory problems that Christine claimed to have noticed. He looked at me seriously. He said the medication could cause some dizziness, especially at first, but that at the doses I was taking, mental confusion was not a common side effect. He asked if I was experiencing those symptoms. I told him no, that I felt perfectly clear mentally, that I could remember everything, concentrate on work, make complex decisions without problems. He made notes in my chart. Then he asked me directly if there was a reason I was asking. If someone was suggesting I was not mentally capable. I thought about lying, about keeping the secret until I had a complete plan. But I needed an ally. I needed someone who could testify, if necessary, that I was perfectly competent. I told him everything. Not about the infidelity, that did not matter at that moment, but about the plan to have me declared incompetent, about the powers of attorney I had signed, about the suspicions I had that Christine might be doing something to my medication or food to make me seem more confused than I was. His face became very serious. He said that what I was describing was elder abuse, that it was a crime, that I needed to protect myself immediately. He offered to do a complete neurological and psychiatric evaluation right there, that day, to document my mental state. He said he would do it for free if necessary, that this was too important. I accepted. We spent 3 hours that afternoon doing tests, memory tests, logic tests, coordination tests. He checked everything, documented everything. At the end, he told me what I already knew. I was perfectly healthy mentally. There was no sign of confusion, dementia, or any condition that would affect my decision-making capacity. He gave me copies of all the reports. He told me to keep them in a safe place. He also gave me the name of a lawyer specialized in elder rights. He said I needed legal help, that this was beyond what he could do for me as a doctor. I thanked him and left the clinic with a folder full of medical documents proving my competence. It was the first step, but I needed more. I needed proof of the conspiracy. I needed to document what they were planning. That same afternoon, I went to an electronics store and bought a small voice recorder, the kind that looks like a pen. I also bought a button camera. I felt ridiculous, like a character in a spy movie, but I needed evidence. For the next 3 weeks, I recorded everything. Every conversation with Christine, every dinner where she prepared my food, and I felt strange afterward. Every moment when she tried to confuse me with repeated questions or contradictory information. I also installed security cameras in my office at home, small cameras that looked like alarm detectors. I told Christine they were part of a new security system for the whole house. She barely paid attention. Those cameras captured things that still make me feel sick when I remember them. They captured Christine going through my papers when I was not home. They captured her on the phone with Marco, laughing about my senility. They captured her mixing something into my evening juice, something that made the liquid cloudier. I took samples of that juice to a private laboratory. They found sedatives, not enough to seriously harm me, but enough to make me drowsy, slow, confused. She had been drugging me. My own wife had been drugging me to make me seem incompetent. I also started recording my conversations with Marco at work. I was careful, always kept the recorder in my shirt pocket. In 2 weeks, I had hours of recordings where he treated me with barely concealed contempt, where he made decisions without consulting me, where he talked to employees as if he were already the sole owner of the company. In one particularly revealing conversation, Marco told one of our biggest clients that he should not worry about my confusion, that I was stepping back for health reasons, that soon he would be making all the important decisions alone. The client asked if I was okay. Marco said it was sad but inevitable. That old age comes for everyone. Old age. I was 64 years old. I had another 20 years of productive life if I took care of myself. But to them I was already useless, already discarded. Every night I went home and transcribed the recordings. I organized everything in a detailed file, dates, times, exact quotes. I made backup copies and kept them in 3 different places. In my office at work, in a bank safe deposit box, and with the lawyer my cardiologist had recommended. The lawyer, a woman named Patricia who specialized in elder abuse cases, reviewed everything I had gathered. She told me I had a solid case, that with the medical reports, the recordings, the evidence of drugging, I could not only defend myself, but also file criminal charges if I wanted. But I did not want just to defend myself. I did not want just to stop them. I wanted them to feel the same betrayal I felt, the same humiliation, the same pain of discovering that the people you loved were your worst enemies. Patricia asked me what I wanted to do. I told her I wanted to wait. I wanted to gather more evidence. I wanted to make sure that when I acted, it would be devastating and definitive. She warned me it was risky, that the longer I waited, the more time they had to do real damage. But she also understood. She had seen many cases like mine. She knew that sometimes legal justice was not enough, that sometimes people needed emotional justice too. So I continued playing the role they expected of me. I pretended to be more confused each day. I asked the same questions repeatedly. I forgot names of people I knew well. I seemed disoriented in familiar places. Christine became more confident. She stopped hiding her contempt. She started leaving me alone for entire days, saying she was with friends but coming home with Marco's cologne on her clothes. She did not even try to hide it anymore. Marco too became bolder. He started making major business decisions without consulting me. He told employees I was semi-retired. He changed passwords on company accounts, saying it was for security, but effectively locking me out of my own business. And I let them. I let them believe they were winning. I let them believe I was too confused to notice what was happening. I let them believe they were smarter than me, all while I gathered more evidence, more recordings, more documents, more proof of their betrayal. 3 months before my 65th birthday party, I met with Patricia to plan my strategy. I had all the evidence I needed to destroy them legally, but I wanted more. I wanted to make sure that when I revealed what I knew, they would lose everything, not just face legal consequences. Patricia listened to my plan and was silent for a long moment. Then she said it was risky, that there were many things that could go wrong, but she also said she understood that after what they had done to me, I deserved to take back control in the most complete way possible. The first thing we did was invalidate all the powers of attorney I had signed. Patricia filed the paperwork with a judge, presenting the medical evidence that I had been drugged when I signed them, that I had been manipulated using my health condition. The judge approved it immediately. All those documents Christine thought gave her control over my assets became worthless pieces of paper. But we did it quietly. We did not notify Christine or Marco. Legally, we should have. But Patricia found a way to delay the notification. She said there was a backlog in the court system, that the papers would be sent eventually. Meanwhile, Christine and Marco continued believing they had legal power over me. The next step was more complicated. I needed to protect my business assets before they could touch them. Marco was my 50-50 partner. On paper, he owned half of everything, but the reality was more complex than that. Our partnership agreement had clauses we had written 15 years ago when we trusted each other. One of those clauses said that if one partner was found to be acting against the interests of the company or was found to be involved in illegal activities, the other partner could buy out their share at fair market value. I started documenting every decision Marco made without consulting me. Every time he diverted company resources for personal use, every client he contacted behind my back, every employee he tried to turn against me. I had it all on recordings, in emails, in text messages, but I needed more. I needed proof of something clearly illegal, and that is when I discovered the embezzlement. It started with a small discrepancy I noticed in the accounts, a payment to a supplier that seemed higher than usual. I asked our accountant about it casually, pretending to be confused, asking if maybe I was remembering the wrong amount. The accountant, a young man named David, who had been with the company for 3 years, looked uncomfortable. He said the payment was correct, that he had verified it himself, but something in his face told me he was not telling the complete truth. I waited a week, then asked him again, this time in private in my office with the door closed. I told him I was not angry, that I was not accusing him of anything, but that I needed to know if something strange was happening with the accounts. David broke down. He told me that Marco had been pressuring him for over a year to falsify records. Nothing too obvious, just small amounts here and there. Payments to suppliers that did not exist. Bonuses to employees who had not received them. Travel expenses that had never been incurred. At first David had refused, but Marco threatened to fire him, said he would make sure he never worked in the industry again. David had a wife and a baby on the way. He needed the job. So he did what Marco asked. I asked him how much total. David said he would need to review everything carefully, but he estimated it was at least 2 million pesos over the past year. 2 million pesos that Marco had been stealing from our company, from our joint work. I told David he would not be fired, that he would not face any consequences for telling me the truth, that I needed him to gather all the evidence of what Marco had forced him to do. Every falsified record, every fake invoice, every diverted payment. David worked through the weekend to compile everything. When he finished, it was worse than I thought. Marco had not been stealing for 1 year. He had been stealing for 5 years. The total was close to 8 million pesos. 8 million pesos. It was not enough to bankrupt the company. We were successful enough to absorb that loss, but it was enough to put Marco in prison for a long time. It was clearly fraud, embezzlement, theft, crimes that carried serious sentences. I took all that documentation to Patricia. She reviewed it with a forensic accountant she trusted. They confirmed what I already knew. It was solid evidence of systematic fraud. With this, I could not only buy out Marco's share of the company, I could have him arrested. But again, I did not act immediately. I wanted everything to come out at the same time. I wanted Christine and Marco to feel the full weight of their betrayal all at once. The next part of my plan was to protect my personal assets, the house, the cars, my savings, investments, everything that Christine would expect to get half of in a divorce. This was trickier. In Mexico, like in most places, assets acquired during marriage are considered community property. Christine had a legal right to half, regardless of who had earned the money. It did not matter that she had not worked a single day during our marriage. It did not matter that I had built everything with my own hands. The law said half was hers. But there were exceptions. Assets received as inheritance were not community property. Gifts were not community property. And assets that could be proven to have been acquired with separate funds from before the marriage, also were not community property. I started going through all my records from the past 28 years. I found that the initial capital I had used to buy our house had come partially from the sale of a property I had inherited from my mother. Not enough to cover the whole house, but enough that a good lawyer could argue a significant portion of the house should be mine alone. The cars were all in my name, purchased with company income that I could prove came from my work, not from community property. My investments had been made with bonuses I had received before marrying Christine. It was not perfect. She would still have claim to some things, but Patricia worked with a specialist in matrimonial law, and between them, they built a case that would minimize what Christine could take. Maybe she would get 20% instead of 50%, maybe less. We also discovered something interesting. Christine had a bank account I did not know about. An account she had opened 2 years ago in her name only. Patricia got a court order to review the statements. That account had received regular deposits from Marco, 50,000 pesos a month for the past 2 years. Marco had been paying her. It was not just an affair, it was a financial arrangement. He was paying my wife to help him steal from me. Those bank statements went into the evidence file. More proof of the conspiracy. More proof that this was not just infidelity, but a calculated plan to defraud me. Around this time, about 6 weeks before my birthday, I had another conversation with my cardiologist. My health had actually improved significantly since I stopped drinking the juice Christine prepared for me. My blood pressure was better. My heart rate was more stable. I had more energy. The doctor noticed the improvement and asked what had changed. I told him I had started preparing my own food, taking my medication on my own schedule, being more careful about what I consumed. He said whatever I was doing was working, that I should continue. I asked him if he would be willing to do another complete evaluation of my mental state, even more detailed than the first one. He agreed. We scheduled it for 2 weeks later. That second evaluation included cognitive tests, psychiatric evaluation, neurological scans. Everything possible to document that not only was I mentally competent, but that I was in better mental health than many people my age. The psychiatrist who did part of the evaluation told me something interesting. She said that people who are under extreme stress, especially stress from emotional abuse, often show signs of cognitive decline that reverses when the source of stress is removed. She said that what Christine and Marco had been doing to me, the gaslighting and manipulation, could have caused real temporary damage to my mental state. But now that I knew what they were doing, now that I was protecting myself, my mind had recovered. The confusion, the forgetfulness, all of it had been a response to being poisoned and manipulated, not a sign of permanent decline. That went into the evidence file too. Proof that they had been harming me, that their actions had had real effects on my health. As my birthday approached, I finalized every detail of my plan. I knew I would reveal everything at the party. It seemed fitting. They had chosen my birthday to plan the final steps of their betrayal. I would choose the same day to destroy them. I hired a technical team to install a projection system at the event hall. I told the hall manager it was for a special video presentation I had prepared. He thought it was for showing old photos or a tribute video. He did not ask questions. I prepared a digital presentation with everything: scans of the medical reports, audio transcripts of the recorded conversations, copies of the embezzlement evidence, photos of the bank statements showing Marco's payments to Christine, everything organized chronologically, telling the complete story. I also invited specific guests: the forensic accountant who had reviewed the books, David, our accountant who had been forced to falsify records, 3 business associates who could testify about Marco's behavior, my cardiologist, Patricia, my lawyer, and I invited Marco's wife, Elena. She did not know about the affair. She thought Marco worked late because he was dedicated to the business. She thought he traveled for work when actually he was traveling with Christine. She deserved to know the truth too. The week before the party, Marco approached me at the office. He had a strange expression on his face, something between concern and excitement. He asked if I was sure I wanted to have such a big party, if maybe it would be too stressful for my heart condition. I almost laughed. He was concerned about my heart now. After spending a year planning to have me declared incompetent, after stealing millions from our company, after sleeping with my wife, I told him the party would be fine, that it was important to me to celebrate with everyone who had been part of my life. He nodded but looked uncomfortable. Maybe some part of him sensed that something was wrong, that I was not acting like the confused old man he expected. Christine also seemed nervous the week before the party. She asked several times if I was feeling okay, if I needed to cancel, if maybe we should do something smaller. I wonder now if she suspected something, or if she was just anxious about putting her divorce plan into action. Either way, I assured her everything was fine. I even thanked her for supporting me, for being by my side during my health problems. She smiled and said that was what wives did, that she would always be there for me. The lies came so easily to her. Even knowing what I knew, watching her lie to my face with such naturalness was chilling. The night before the party, I barely slept. Not from fear or nervousness, but from anticipation. For 3 months I had been playing a role pretending to be weaker than I was. Tomorrow, I would finally take off that mask. Tomorrow, they would see that I had known everything all along. Tomorrow, I would take back my life. Standing on that stage with the microphone in my hand, looking at 200 faces watching me expectantly, I felt a strange calm. For 3 months I had carried the weight of knowing what they were planning. For 3 months I had pretended to be someone I was not. Now finally I could tell the truth. I saw Christine at her table. She had gone pale when she realized I had heard her comment about divorcing me. Marco sat next to her, his confident smile starting to fade. He sensed something was wrong but did not know what yet. I began to speak. My voice was steady, clear, without a trace of the confusion they had been trying to convince everyone I suffered from. I told them I wanted to thank everyone for coming to celebrate my 65 years, that I had planned this party for months because I wanted all the important people in my life to be present for what I had to say. Then I looked directly at Christine and said that marriage was supposed to be based on trust, on mutual support, on being there for each other in sickness and in health. I said I had believed in those vows for 28 years. I pressed a button, and the first image appeared on the screens I had installed on both sides of the hall. It was a transcript of the phone conversation I had accidentally overheard 3 months ago. The lawyer, Marco, and Christine discussing how to have me declared mentally incompetent. The silence in the room was absolute. People started reading, their expressions changing from confusion to shock. I let them read for a full minute before continuing. I explained that this conversation happened 3 months ago, that I had overheard it by accident, that at that moment I discovered my wife and my business partner were planning to steal everything I had built, using my heart condition as an excuse to declare me incompetent. Christine stood up from her table. Her face was red. She tried to say something, but I raised my hand to stop her. I told her she would have her chance to speak. But first, everyone needed to hear the complete story. The next image showed the medical reports from my cardiologist. I explained that immediately after discovering the conspiracy, I had gone to my doctor for a complete evaluation. I read aloud from the report. The doctor stated I was in full possession of my mental faculties, with no signs of confusion, dementia, or any condition that would affect my decision-making capacity. Then I showed the results of the psychiatric evaluation, another specialist confirming I was mentally sound. I explained that these were not old reports. They were from 2 months ago, after Christine and Marco had already started their plan. Marco stood up then. He said this was ridiculous, that I was having some kind of episode, that I was confused and paranoid. He looked around the room seeking support, but people were still reading the screens, still processing what they were seeing. I smiled at him. Then I played the first audio recording. His own voice filled the hall through the sound system. A conversation from 6 weeks ago where he talked to Christine about how much longer they needed to maintain the charade, where he said he was tired of pretending to respect me, that he could barely stand to be in the same room with the senile old man. Senile old man. His words, his voice, undeniable. I played another recording. This one was Christine talking to someone on the phone. She said she had been drugging my juice with sedatives, that it was working well, that I seemed more confused each day, that soon they would have enough documentation to proceed with the guardianship. I watched Christine's face as her own words played for 200 people to hear. She looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her. She tried to leave but found her way blocked by other guests who had stood up to see better. Then I showed the laboratory analysis, the juice samples I had sent for testing, the presence of benzodiazepines, sedatives that should not have been in my system. I explained that my wife had been systematically poisoning me to make me appear mentally incompetent. Someone in the audience gasped. I heard murmurs spreading through the hall, expressions of shock, of disgust, of disbelief, but I was not finished. I displayed the next set of documents, bank statements, Christine's secret account, regular deposits of 50,000 pesos per month from Marco, 2 years of payments. I did the math aloud for everyone, 1,200,000 pesos that Marco had paid to my wife. I asked the room what kind of business arrangement requires secret monthly payments from a business partner to his partner's wife. I let the question hang in the air. Then I played another recording. This one was Marco and Christine in what sounded like a hotel room. Their voices were intimate, affectionate. He called her my love. She called him my life. They talked about their future together, about how soon they would be free, about the trips they would take with my money. Elena, Marco's wife, stood up from her table. Her face was white as paper. She looked at Marco with an expression of absolute betrayal. She had not known. I had suspected she did not know. That was why I made sure to invite her. I told her I was sorry she had to find out this way. But I thought she deserved to know the truth, just as I deserved people to know what had been done to me. Marco tried to approach Elena, but she backed away from him. She said his name once, like a question, like she was asking if this was really happening. He started to say something, but she turned and walked out of the hall. Several people followed her, concerned. I continued. I brought up the accountant David to the stage. He was shaking, but he had agreed to do this. He told everyone how Marco had forced him to falsify company records, how he had threatened David's job if he did not cooperate, how Marco had been systematically stealing from the company we had built together. I showed the documentation David had compiled. 8 million pesos stolen over 5 years, fake invoices, false expense reports, money diverted to personal accounts, all with Marco's signature, Marco's authorization, Marco's theft. I explained that this was not just infidelity or betrayal. These were crimes, embezzlement, fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy, each one with serious legal consequences. Marco tried to leave then. He pushed through people trying to reach the exit, but I had asked 2 security guards to be present, and I had warned them this might happen. They stopped him at the door. Not forcefully, just standing in his way, asking him to please stay until the end of the presentation. I told Marco he should stay. That running would only make things worse. That the authorities already had copies of everything I was showing. That criminal charges had been filed that morning. That whether he left now or in an hour made no difference to what was coming. He stood there by the door, trapped, humiliated, destroyed, just as he had wanted to destroy me. I returned my attention to Christine. She was still at her table, sitting now, her hands covering her face. I could not tell if she was crying or just hiding. I told everyone that I had spent 28 years married to this woman, that I had worked every day to build a good life for us, that I had trusted her completely, given her everything she asked for, believed every word she said, and in return, she had plotted to steal everything from me. She had drugged me. She had conspired with my business partner. She had tried to have me declared incompetent so she could take my assets and leave me with nothing. I said I wanted everyone to understand what they had planned, to see these two people for who they really were, not the charming couple who had been entertaining everyone all night, but the cold, calculating predators who had seen my health problems as an opportunity to rob me. Then I showed the final set of documents, the invalidation of all the powers of attorney I had signed, the medical certificates proving I had been under duress, and the influence of drugs when I signed them. The legal documents showing that every piece of paper Christine thought gave her control over my life was worthless. I also showed the divorce papers I had filed that morning. I was divorcing her for infidelity and attempted fraud. With all the evidence I had presented, she would be lucky to get anything at all in the settlement. And finally, I showed the documents dissolving my partnership with Marco. Based on the fraud he had committed, I was exercising my right under our partnership agreement to buy out his share. A forensic accountant had valued his 50% at current market value, minus the 8 million pesos he had stolen. After the deduction, he owed the company money. Marco would get nothing. Worse than nothing. He would face criminal charges. He would probably go to prison, and he would be financially ruined. I turned off the screens. I looked at Christine, then at Marco. I told them they had made a mistake. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They had mistaken my trust for stupidity. They had thought that because I was 65 years old and had a heart condition, I was finished, useless, easy to dispose of. But I was not finished, I was not weak, and I was not stupid. I told them I hoped the last 3 months had been worth it, because that was how long I had known about their plan. 3 months of pretending to be confused, while I documented every lie, every theft, every moment of their betrayal. 3 months of letting them believe they were winning, while I built the case that would destroy them. I thanked everyone for coming to my party. I apologized that it had turned into something unpleasant, but I said I had no regrets about exposing the truth, that everyone deserved to know who they had been associating with. Then I stepped down from the stage. The hall erupted in noise. People talking, shouting, asking questions. Some approached me to offer support. Others stood frozen, shocked by what they had witnessed. Christine tried to approach me. She was crying now, real tears running down her face. She said we needed to talk, that I did not understand, that she could explain. I looked at her and felt nothing. No anger, no pain, no love, no hate, just emptiness. I told her there was nothing to explain, that everything had been explained already in her own words, on those recordings, in those bank statements. I told her my lawyer would be in touch about the divorce proceedings, that she should find herself a good attorney because she would need one. Then I walked away from her. Marco was being questioned by the security guards. The police had been called. They would want to interview him about the embezzlement. He saw me looking at him, and his face twisted with rage. He shouted that I would regret this, that he would fight the charges, that I had not won anything. I did not respond. Men who have truly lost always think they can still win. It would take time for him to understand how completely he had destroyed himself. The weeks after the party were chaotic. The story spread quickly. In a city like ours, a scandal like that at a party with 200 guests could not be kept quiet. Within days, everyone knew. Business associates, acquaintances, people I barely knew, stopped me on the street to offer support or to ask questions. Christine moved out of the house 3 days after the party. She took her clothes and personal items and left. She did not ask for anything else. Her lawyer contacted Patricia to discuss the divorce settlement, but they had no leverage. With all the evidence of infidelity, conspiracy, and attempted fraud, Christine was lucky Patricia agreed not to pursue criminal charges against her in exchange for a quick, quiet divorce. She signed the papers 2 months later. She got 10% of our community assets. A car, some money, enough to start over, but nowhere near what she had expected. She tried to negotiate, to argue she deserved more, but her lawyer eventually convinced her to take what was offered. The alternative was facing criminal prosecution for elder abuse and conspiracy to commit fraud. I heard she left town shortly after the divorce was finalized. Someone told me she moved to Monterrey to live with a cousin. I did not ask for details. She was no longer part of my life, and I wanted to keep it that way. Marco's situation was worse. The criminal charges proceeded. David, the accountant, testified against him. The forensic accountant presented all the documentation of the embezzlement. Marco tried to claim he had planned to return the money, that it was a temporary loan, that there had been misunderstandings. But 8 million pesos is not a misunderstanding. The judge did not believe him. He was convicted of fraud and embezzlement. The sentence was 6 years in prison. Elena divorced him while he was awaiting trial. She got custody of their 2 children and most of their assets. I heard she was doing well, that she had gone back to work as a teacher and was rebuilding her life. I was glad. She had been an innocent victim in all of this, just like me. The company survived the scandal. In fact, it thrived. Without Marco's theft and mismanagement, our profits increased significantly within the first quarter. I promoted David to Chief Financial Officer. He had been forced to participate in the fraud, but he had come forward when given the chance. He had integrity, and that was worth more than anything. I also hired a new operations manager to help with the workload, a capable woman named Sophia, who had 15 years of experience in the industry. She was 52 years old, divorced, focused on her career. We worked well together. Nothing romantic, just mutual respect and shared goals. My health improved dramatically in the months after the party. The stress that had been affecting my heart disappeared. My blood pressure normalized. My cardiologist was amazed at the improvement. He said it was one of the clearest examples he had seen of how toxic relationships directly impact physical health. I stopped taking most of my medications. My heart was strong. My mind was clear. I felt better at 65 than I had felt at 60. But the most important change was internal. For years, I had felt diminished. I had accepted Christine's treatment of me as something I deserved. I had believed on some level that I was boring, old, no longer desirable or valuable. The process of discovering the conspiracy, of documenting it, of fighting back, had awakened something in me I thought I had lost. Self-respect, confidence, the certainty that I deserved better than what I had been accepting. I started doing things I had stopped doing years ago. I traveled to visit old friends I had not seen in decades. I took a trip to Oaxaca just to see the architecture and eat the food. I went to concerts, museums, places I had always wanted to go but Christine had never been interested in. I discovered I enjoyed my own company. After years of living with someone who made me feel worthless, being alone felt like freedom. 6 months after the party, on a Tuesday afternoon, I was having coffee at a cafe near my office when I saw Christine. She was with a man I did not recognize. He looked to be in his 40s, well-dressed, apparently successful. They were laughing about something. Our eyes met for a moment. She looked like she wanted to say something, but I looked away first. I had nothing to say to her. She was a stranger to me now, someone I used to know, someone who had hurt me, but who no longer had any power over me. I finished my coffee and left. I did not look back. Later that day, Sophia came to my office to review some contracts. As she was leaving, she paused at the door and asked if I was doing okay. She said I seemed different lately, lighter somehow. I thought about her question, was I okay? More than okay. I was free. Free from lies, from manipulation, from living with people who wanted to destroy me. Free from pretending everything was fine when it was not. Free from accepting less than I deserved. I told her I was better than I had been in years. She smiled and said it showed. That night I went home to my house, the house Christine and I had shared, but which now was mine alone. I had remodeled after she left, changed the furniture, painted the walls, made it feel like a new space, a space that belonged to me, that reflected who I was, not who someone else wanted me to be. I made dinner for myself, something simple but good. I ate slowly, enjoying each bite, sitting at my table watching the sunset through the window. My phone rang. It was my younger brother, calling to check on me as he did every week since the party. He asked how I was doing, if I needed anything. I told him I was fine, better than fine. He said he was proud of me, that what I had done took courage, that a lot of men in my situation would have just accepted the betrayal, would have let themselves be destroyed because they did not have the strength to fight back. I told him I almost had been one of those men, that if I had not accidentally overheard that phone conversation, if I had not discovered what they were planning, I probably would have let them do it. I would have believed I was confused, incompetent, useless. I would have accepted their version of reality, but I had discovered the truth, and the truth had saved me. We talked for a while longer, then said goodbye. I sat in my living room as the house grew dark around me. I did not turn on the lights immediately. I just sat there in the comfortable silence of my own home, thinking about everything that had happened. A year ago, I had been trapped. Trapped in a marriage that was killing me. Trapped with people who saw me as nothing more than a source of money. Trapped in a version of myself that was weak, confused, diminished. Now I was free. The divorce was final. Marco was in prison. The company was thriving. My health was excellent. My life was entirely my own. I thought about Christine's comment at the party, that I was an old man who did not satisfy her anymore, that she was tired of pretending. She had been right about one thing. I was 65 years old. But old? No. I was not old. I was experienced. I was wise. I was strong enough to fight back when someone tried to destroy me. And satisfying? I did not need to satisfy her. I did not need to satisfy anyone but myself. I finally turned on the lights, made myself tea, sat down with a book I had been wanting to read for months but never had time for. At some point, I realized I was smiling, not because something funny had happened, not because I was thinking about revenge or about their punishment, but because I was content. Content with my life, content with my choices, content with who I was. The next morning I woke up early and went to the office. Sophia and I had a meeting with a potential new client, a major corporation looking for transportation services. It would be the biggest contract we had ever handled. The meeting went well. The client was impressed with our operation, our reliability, our growth. At the end, the CEO asked about my partner, said he had heard there used to be 2 owners. I told him there had been, but that I had bought him out, that the company was now solely mine. The CEO nodded, said sometimes that was for the best, that partnerships could be complicated. I agreed. Partnerships could indeed be complicated, especially when your partner was sleeping with your wife and planning to rob you. But I did not say that. I just smiled and said I was happy with how things had turned out, that sometimes life forces changes on us, and those changes turn out to be exactly what we needed. We signed the contract that day. 5 years, guaranteed revenue, exponential growth for the company. It was the kind of opportunity Marco and I had always dreamed of. Now it was mine alone. That evening, I called my cardiologist to schedule my regular checkup. He had wanted to see me every 3 months to monitor my heart. When I arrived for the appointment the following week, he did the usual tests, checked my blood pressure, listened to my heart. Then he sat back and looked at me with an expression of professional satisfaction. He said my improvement over the past 6 months had been remarkable, that my heart function was better than it had been in 2 years, that whatever I was doing, I should keep doing it. I told him I had removed some toxic elements from my life. He laughed and said that was the best medicine there was, that he had seen it time and time again, people whose health problems disappeared when they escaped toxic relationships. He said I was a textbook example of how emotional well-being directly affects physical health, that the body keeps the score, as they say, that all those months of stress and betrayal had been literally poisoning my heart. But now my heart was healing, strong, steady, ready for many more years. As I left his office, I thought about that metaphor, my heart healing. It was true in more ways than one. 3 months later, I turned 66 years old. This time I did not have a party. I did not want 200 guests and speeches and celebrations. Instead, I invited my brother and his family, a few close friends, Sophia and her teenage daughter, and we had a small dinner at my favorite restaurant. It was perfect, simple, genuine, surrounded by people who actually cared about me. People who saw me as a person, not as a source of money or status or anything else. Sophia gave me a gift, a book about business philosophy. Inside, she had written, "To new beginnings and hard-won wisdom." I was touched by the gesture, by her thoughtfulness. My brother raised a toast. He said the past year had been difficult, but that I had emerged stronger, that he was proud to call me his brother, that I was an example of resilience and dignity. I thanked him. I thanked all of them. I said that 66 felt like a rebirth, that I was starting a new chapter of my life with clear eyes and an open heart. When I got home that night, I stood on my balcony looking at the city lights. I thought about where I had been a year ago, married to a woman who despised me, in business with a man who was robbing me, drugged, manipulated, marked for destruction, and where I was now, free, successful, healthy, at peace. I thought about revenge. People had asked me if I felt guilty about exposing Christine and Marco so publicly, if I regretted destroying their lives the way they had tried to destroy mine. I did not feel guilty. They had made their choices. They had plotted against me for years. They had drugged me, stolen from me, laughed at me behind my back. Everything that happened to them was a consequence of their own actions, but I did not feel satisfied by their punishment either. Marco in prison and Christine exiled did not make me happy. Their suffering did not heal my wounds. What healed me was this: standing on my balcony in my own home, living my own life, free from their poison. This peace, this quiet satisfaction, this certainty that I had taken back control of my own story, this was my revenge. Not their destruction, but my liberation. I went inside, got ready for bed, and slept deeply. No nightmares, no anxiety, no pain, just rest, peaceful, deserved rest. And in the morning, I would wake up and continue building the life I deserved. One day at a time, one decision at a time, one moment of freedom at a time.